I'm excited to share a quick tutorial on doing the bias binding for the All the Things Tote. This is my All the Things Tote bag pattern. You kind of can't see because this is the large size. This is the biggest size. I'm going to use it for a craft night bag. Anyway, so I wanted to show you. So I've got it all finished, assembled, and I just need to cover the binding on the raw edge of the bag. So I have my bias all prepped here. I have my stiletto ready, and I have my pins. So this is a trick for bias binding. You use bias binding because it's cut on the bias and it's stretchy, and it will wrap around this curve really easily. So you're going to fold it in half, and I like to pin it every 4 to 6 inches, just like this, directly in half. And the reason is so that it doesn't get twisted. So bias can twist really easily. If it's not cut on the perfect 45-degree angle, it can twist. But if it gets off, I'm going to see if I can mimic what happens if it gets off. So if it's not folded correctly, you can kind of see how it will ripple like that. See how it like kind of folds on top of itself and it will ripple. So to prevent rippling, we're just going to pin this every 4 to 6 inches directly in half. You can iron it. I don't usually iron the bias just because I like the way that it rolls over nicely when it's not ironed. But if you want to try ironing it, feel free. You can always try that. And so I will just pin those, and then I will be attaching this. I prefer to attach it to this side of the bag first. So I'm going to overlap this about a 1/2 inch past the top edge of the bag, or 3/4, 1/2 inch to 3/4. And then I'm going to use my Wonder Clips. This is I like storing them in my Hello Pouch pattern. It's the smallest size. And just clip this on in place. And use as many clips as you want. I like using a lot of clips because I feel like it's really helpful to just keep everything right in place. And so the reason I like to sew it to this side of the bag versus this side is this is flat. So it's nice when you're sewing this on the base of your machine that you have all this excess. You can just smash it down and right out of the way. And I'll show you when I'm sewing it, but it's just much easier to attach it to this side first, and then we'll flip it over and attach it and sew it down on the other side. So I'm going to get this all pinned and ready to go. All right, like I said before, I'm going to put the flat side of the bag against the base of my sewing machine. And then I'm just going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam, and you leave this tail and you're just going to start sewing right at the top edge of the binding. I like to back stitch at the beginning too. I like to sew with my needle down doing this as well, so when I stop around the curve, it doesn't pull off the machine. And when you're working with a project that's as bulky as this, it's really nice to keep the bag weight from hanging off of the machine so that it doesn't pull your needle and break your needle. So just watch that as you're sewing with a project this big, and sew slow. And I'm trying to think of all the tips I can share that make this part a little bit easier, but it's important as well to keep your true 1/4 inch seam so that when you wrap it around, your bindings will look really nice. So after that is sewn, I like to go through and check and make sure that I caught all of this in here, especially on the corners. I want to make sure that I didn't nothing flipped, so that when I stitch this down, I don't come back and find that I had caught something and then you have to undo 2 layers of stitching. So I think it's an important thing to check that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to just wrap this around, and I like to use my Wonder Clips. You don't have to use your Wonder Clips, but I just think It's always helpful, especially the first few times you do this. I think it's really helpful to use your wonder clips, and you can even clip it and leave it overnight, and it compresses the soft and stable really nicely, so then it makes it a lot easier to sew through. I've tried that a few times on really thick parts. So especially these corners, if you have excess here, you can trim out, just do like trim a little bit at a time. I like to keep this binding full, but you can trim out extra if your seam allowance got a little off on the corners. But this one's looking pretty good at this point. It's feeling this, and then I want it to like cover or match up at least with that stitching line that I just did when attaching it. And it looks like this one's a little bit thick of a seam, so I'm going to do a little bit of trimming of that corner. When you're doing that part, make sure that you move your binding out of the way. You don't want to cut through your binding. Okay, so we have the top edges of our binding. So what we're going to do is fold this over, and I like to fold this in just like more than halfway so that it kind of, it will tuck itself in. So then once you fold that in, you see this little extra part won't be hanging over, because I want that tucked in there. Nice, so it's not hanging out. So then this is how the top edge is, because you fold over it and then tuck it in so it's all finished. So I'm going to do that on this side too. Okay, so now we are ready to stitch down our binding. So for this part, I like to use my favorite sewing notion ever, the Spy-Annie's pressing tool and stiletto. It's got a pressing tool on the end and stiletto. It's really great for holding this binding down and gripping the fabric if you need, especially on this part when you want to make sure that you cover that seam, catch everything in there. So, and remember to backstitch. I find using lots of clips helps me sew a little bit slower, because it takes a minute to take off each clip. So that's a tip to help you be able to just take your time and enjoy the process. So at this point, when you have all of this excess here, just be sure to smash it right out of the way. We have our binding done on one side of the bag. Now I will just finish up and attach the binding on the other side.